to the Hell of a Road podcast. I'm Ethan.
And I'm Paul.
We've made it to episode 4.
Yeah, let's see. It's not a momentous one like next episode 5 will be because it's a whole number.
Mm-hmm.
But it's still going to be good. I got a good feeling about number 4.
Okay, and maybe for one of these episodes, I'll do a little intro song. So it has a little more of a grand entrance to this thing. But for now, it's just us talking.
Yeah, that's okay. We'll get there. When the fans look back at it on episode 400 and they're like, I've been listening since episode 4 before the theme song, then that'll be, the mark of a true and tried hero. So
yes. So what's been going on with you?
Well, I took a little road trip out to the city of Las Vegas, Nevada this past weekend.
You had mentioned to me before how you're not really a huge fan of that city.
Yeah. The city itself it just depends. I guess it depends on the group you're with, right? Because the main things that Vegas is known for is obviously the gambling, the booze, other sorts of debauchery. And I'm not necessarily into all of that stuff. So it's not really a city for me, but there are other things around it that I really do enjoy, that if you go there and you want to do something besides the gambling, the booze, and the debauchery, there's
other things?
There is. Did you know that only like an hour away from there is one of the greatest engineering marvels in the world, the Hoover Dam? Have you been?
Yeah, I have not.
It is.
I know.
You got to see it. The dam itself is great, but at the same time, when you stand on the dam, there's this bridge that they built that goes over the dam, I guess you could say. It's still a ways away from the dam, but it kind of like makes this giant frame around the beautiful nothingness out in the Arizona desert. That's just a sight to be seen. You have to see it. That was actually my big takeaway from the Hoover Dam when I went a couple years ago. So, but yeah, that's only like an hour away from Vegas. So definitely go check that thing out. And then what else is out there? About another hour away in the other direction, the Valley of Fire, which is a pretty awesome place. Lots of red rocks, and it doesn't sound very good. It's just a bunch of red rocks, but no, it's very picturesque.
Rocks are cool.
Yeah, it's really cool to see some great backgrounds, especially if you're into photography. Really cool place. Car photography, especially. You can take some really cool shots out there. So yeah, definitely check those things out when you're out there too. But we didn't do any of that. We hung out in the hotel and we were without the kids. So I napped. I think I took a 5-hour nap on Saturday. It was awesome. It was the best. It was so good. And I ate a lot. So that was good. Yeah. Did a buffet, did a couple different little food spots. So it was good.
I'm about to head out on a little trip down to San Diego this week. My wife is actually going to a social media conference. So we're taking our daughter down there, and we're going to we had planned to stop by the Walker Canyon poppy fields in Lake Elsinore, where the big super bloom is going on. And you might have heard about this in the news recently, because every Instagrammer, every influencer known to man has come down there and apparently trampled all over the poppies, and they had to close the whole poppy field.
Right.
Turns out there were some people that weren't staying on the trail and causing a whole lot of problems, but really it came down to just apparently more people than that little tiny city could handle. So yeah, we were going to go down there. Turns out they closed it, but I just found out a couple minutes ago that they reopened it. So I might be able to get down there and actually check out some of this poppy super bloom that's been going on. And our plan is to go there and trample as many poppies as possible.
Yeah, they were saying Disneyland size crowds, which is pretty insane.
Yes, it's pretty nuts. But I guess, basically the city they didn't have really the resources to deal with that many people. So they just like, shut it down. We can't handle this. They couldn't get in there to direct traffic. Apparently there was, one of the people that was directing traffic got hit in a hit and run.
Oh boy.
They couldn't get in there they were going to shuttle people in, but they couldn't get the shuttles in there, and they couldn't get the porta potties clean. So there was a lot of stuff going on, and people were parking on the side of the 15 freeway, which is ridiculous. It's like, you know what? Just keep driving. I guess California Highway Patrol was out there ticketing people, but I understand why people want to go and check this out. I mean, we really want to do it.
Hmm.
We just don't want to do it on a weekend when there's 100,000 people there.
Right.
So hopefully go there maybe tomorrow morning and see if we can see what remaining poppies are left that haven't been trampled by influencers.
There you go. Yeah, I think
Yep.
you'll have a pretty good chance of getting to see some of it tomorrow morning for sure, because
Yeah.
it's Tuesday morning. It will be a Tuesday
Hmm.
morning day. So
Yes, definitely. Yeah. So hopefully we can get out there and my daughter can experience some poppies. We had thought we had toyed with the idea of going to Anza Borrego State Park, which is
mm,
another great place to see wildflowers and perfect photo opportunities and just tons and tons of desert you can walk through and just admire and just experience and take it all in. But not a ton of time. We got to get down there to the conference, so we figured the Walker poppy fields are right off the 15 freeway, so hopefully it can be just a quick shot. So yeah, that's our travel plans right now.
cool. Well, it sounds like it'll be a
Yeah,
great time. Well, fun. So we've got lots of fun stuff going on. We've been to Vegas. We've got San Diego. So cool. Good stuff.
yeah.
So what do we want to talk about today?
A lot of different episode ideas, but one of the ones that kind of we talked about early on was racing. We're both. I've done some racing. You're interested in racing. You've done some autocrossing. You're a race fan. You watched the F1 recently. I don't really watch a whole lot of racing. I'm kind of more into just the driving aspect of it. I haven't really followed too much recently, but I think this would be a good episode to talk about that. And I've done a lot of lemons, 24 hours of lemons racing. I did a little Spec Miata. You did the autocrossing, so maybe we can talk about like people that want to dip their toe into this and get involved.
Sure.
What would this the first steps be?
Yeah, I think that would be great. And with that, I can kind of kick things off with autocrossing because
Yeah.
at least in my opinion, I think it is probably one of the most accessible forms of motorsport you can get yourself into. You can do it with
Hmm.
pretty much any car. I don't know about some nice Malays era land yachts, but you
I
never.
would like to try it with my Chrysler Fifth Avenue.
Yeah, no, I think it would be.
Yeah.
It would definitely be an interesting thing to see. That's for sure.
Yes. Hmm.
Just for those that don't know what autocross is, it is a set up course of cones that's usually held in like a parking lot or a wash basin. If you're from Southern California and you autocross, you know about the wash basin at California Speedway.
Hmm.
Um, it's daunting at first because you see this sea of cones and you think, how the hell am I going to find my way through this? But once you're actually out on the course, it's not that bad. A lot of first timers get a little freaked out by it, but once
Hmm.
you go take one run through the course, you'll be okay. So, but yeah,
And is it something that like let's say you go to autocrossing at California Speedway
Mhm.
with one organization, is it generally the same course every time you do it, or do they kind of mix it up?
Um, they'll mix it up. It depends. There's lots of different organizations that set these up. When I was doing a lot of my autocrossing, it was when I had my Mini Cooper and I was autocrossing with the BMW CCA.
Hmm.
Great organization. I was actually doing a lot of my autocrossing though in San Diego with the San
Okay.
Diego chapter, and we were autocrossing at the Qualcomm Stadium parking lots, which are
Hmm.
massive.
Okay. Yep.
Excuse me. Here I go with the coughing again. But that was a spectacle in itself. That stadium because of how long the courses were. Because a typical autocross well, let me back up a little bit. Like one of the most, or shall I say, the most well-known organization that runs these is the SCCA, the Sports Car Club of
Sure.
America.
Yep.
They run what they call Solo 2, which is the same basic idea as I've been talking about, except for their courses tend to be shorter. The runs last anywhere from about 40 seconds to about maybe pushing 2 minutes, depending on how big the course is. If I'm talking Qualcomm Stadium, San Diego chapter BMW CCA, that's about 2 minutes on their courses,
Okay.
which is huge.
Mhm.
So yeah, all the different organizations, the same premise is pretty much there. Get through the cones as fast as you can. you're usually classed in whatever how they have it set up. So like BMW CCA, I was driving my Mini, so I was in the Mini Cooper class, which was anything from a base Mini Cooper like mine was all the way up to the most fanciest with $1,000 suspension or multi-$1,000
Okay.
suspension on it and racing slicks. They didn't care. All the minis go together. They had different
Mhm.
classes for all the BMWs, like
Okay.
so. But either or, that's how they did it. So
Sure.
SCCA's got a bunch of different classes, and it's very, very competitive. But the one common thing that happens out at an autocross is you have to work the course. So,
Yeah.
which
Yep.
can be cool, but at the same time, if you're autocrossing in the summer, it's not the funnest thing because you're standing in it, usually an unshaded parking lot in the blistering heat
For hours.
for seemingly hours. Yeah, it does take a
Sure.
long time,
Okay.
and you're going and catching cones that people hit. So,
Yep.
but even through all that, it's a ton of fun. And when I was doing it, I had a ton of fun in my Mini. I tried it a
Mhm.
few more times after that in different cars I owned, with a different group, with the Speed Ventures group.
Oh, yeah.
they
Yep.
run they run a autocross they call a no work autocross, which you don't have
Oh,
to
okay.
work, so that's pretty cool.
Sure.
Only downside is it's usually the same course every time with minimal changes, so
Okay.
there's not really a big variation, and the course isn't super long either, but it's still an autocross, and it's still a ton of fun to get in the car, strap on your helmet, and go do your best to get the best time out there. So can't go wrong with it. So it's a great introduction to motorsports that
Sure. Yeah, yeah.
you got to wear a helmet to, and you're
Yep.
really out there racing against the clock. So it's pretty cool. I really enjoy it. I hope to do some future autocrosses with the Daihatsu. I think that would be fun to take out there,
Yep.
and
Yep, and funny.
funny at the
Yep.
same time. And
Yes.
also with the Fit, I think that would be fun to take that out there as well too.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
we'll get them both out there.
I guess that's the cool thing about autocrossing, really just take anything you want out there. It's seems like it would be a good thing to try for people. What is kind of the average cost for something like this?
So just the entrance to the events, depending on the group, I know SCCA runs very minimal entrance fees. I think it's like $25 or $35.
Oh, wow,
Yeah, which
okay.
is cheap. But the problem with that group is you've typically got to be a member, an SCCA member, which I believe
Sure.
is 75 a year now.
Yep.
I'm not quite sure. And
Yeah, probably somewhere around there.
and there's so many people at those events, you only get a few runs versus something like BMW CCA. Their events are more money. They're about $65, but you'll get probably around maybe 15 runs a day, which is quite a few. And
Okay.
then Speed Ventures, they run them for $75, which is a lot of money for an autocross, but you can buy this extra pass that's, I think, $10 more or $15 more that lets you run whenever you want. So you can run as many laps as you want, which is pretty cool.
Sure. So, another question I have for you, are you any good at autocrossing?
Well, when I first started, I didn't know what to expect because all of my
Sure.
racing up to that point had been behind the PlayStation controller.
Okay.
And my first event, I want to say it was 2005, and
Mhm.
it was a very interesting and humbling experience to get out there and see
Yeah.
how much different it is to really push a car in truly in anger, not just driving it in the canyons and
Sure.
using caution. This was, I'm going all out, balls out as much as I can on the autocross course, and seeing where I needed to improve. So over the course of the years, I did improve and I got better at it, I think. Um, the I After my Mini, I had a Mazda 2, which I had set up pretty well for autocross, but I didn't keep the car that long, which, looking back on it, maybe I should have, but that's another story for
Mhm.
another day. And it was pretty quick, but then after that, I had a Fiesta ST, and
Yep.
that thing was a a beast out there, and it really.
Why don't you have that car anymore? What happened to that one?
Oh, there's a story behind that. There's a couple little
Okay.
things that car had on it that I couldn't stand driving.
Okay. Well, we don't have to get into that now.
No,
It's just
but
I'm just curious. That seems like a car you might keep for a little while longer, but
yeah, I had it for
all
about two
right.
and a half
All right.
years. But
Okay.
it was, I got gradually, better. I'm not the best one out there, that's for sure. I my only real time I ever placed, which I hold near and dear to my heart, was at a actually it was a Los Angeles BMW CCA autocross that was at the California Speedway in the Basin, and it was a wet autocross. So
Ooh,
yeah,
okay. That's pretty impressive. Yeah,
and
that's pretty nice.
I placed in my Mini Cooper. I got second place for Mini Cooper, and I was pretty happy with that. It was my first ever trophy I won, even though it was at a silly autocross. So
Yeah.
I did what I always said I would do, and I gave the trophy to my dad, and so he's got it proudly displayed on the mantle at his house. So
I
I get
mean,
the rest of the trophies,
yeah,
but I haven't had any more
sure.
since then.
Okay.
So yeah, it's a
All right.
ton of fun. Get out there and do it.
Well, I guess the other thing was in terms of let's say you want to die because I've never autocrossed. I've only done wheel to wheel and track stuff. So let's say you want to take your car, you've got a Fiesta ST or something like that, and you want to dive in. What kind of prep? Just basically show up, make sure your brakes and tires are operating properly. You got a helmet. Is that kind of all you need?
That's all you need, but if you have just your basic run of the mill all season tires, you will, if you're pushing the car at any sort of like, trying to like get better and better, you will roast up your tires.
Mm-hmm.
So it's usually best to get a set of dedicated wheels with some at least like extreme performance. Some are like 200 treadwear tires on them. Um,
Mm-hmm.
that'll probably be the best thing. You'll have the most fun that way. I've autocrossed on some really crap tires, and it really degrades the experience. So
Okay.
yeah, you got to
Yeah.
have that
You're just
stuff.
sliding all over the place.
Sliding and just not gripping,
Sure.
that
Yep.
kind of stuff. The brakes matter depending on the size of the track. If you're at a huge long 2-minute autocross like at Qualcomm Stadium, I had to upgrade the brakes and the lines and everything on the Mini, just because there was some really hard braking zones, because typically you don't brake 60 miles an hour on an autocross
Mm-hmm.
unless it was at Qualcomm Stadium, and they have some straightaways out there where the cars were getting really fast, and I'm talking some of the M cars doing almost clipping 100 miles an hour in a parking lot.
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
you need to make sure your brakes are up to snuff on that one. So, but
Yes.
other than that, yeah, just that and a helmet. And just any other quick little piece of advice. There's this little device called a CG lock. I don't know if you've ever heard of this.
Mm-hmm.
It's basically this little contraption that hooks on to the plastic portion of your seatbelt and basically keeps your seat in you, that without getting into the engineering behind it. You install it, and it helps keep at least the lap belt portion very snug around yourself to hold you in your seat. Because when you're autocrossing
Sure.
and you're doing you're changing directions very very fast, most people don't have racing harnesses in their cars
Sure.
or super supportive seats. Maybe this thing helps tremendously. It was one of the very best purchases I ever made. When I was autocrossing, having one of those.
That sounds awesome. Yeah, that's a really good tip. How much does something like that run?
I believe they're $40 to $50.
Okay.
They're not very expensive. It's
All right.
much cheaper than buying a whole harness assembly for your car.
Yeah. Nice.
Yeah,
Well, autocrossing, I've never done it. I would like to do it. I would like to do it in a stupid car though. That
yeah.
would be kind of my
Well,
speed, I think.
I've got some ideas in my head for some wheel and tire sizes for the Daihatsu, so I think it might be fun to go out and see how that does out there. And yeah, I think we
Mhm.
can have some fun with that. And
Okay.
good first experience with 3 cylinders of fury
Fury, yes,
ro-
exactly.
rolling around the track. So it should be a good time. So, but after autocross, what's the next step we would take in motorsports? Like, let's say you want to,
Well,
your goal is, I don't want to say Formula One, but you want to work your way up. So wheel to wheel racing. So that's kind of where things stopped for me, because
sure.
there's a big wall of money that I couldn't get past to get to the next
Well,
step.
sure. I mean, I guess there's one step in between which a lot of people do, track days. And I considered that briefly for a moment, taking your street car to a road course
Hmm.
like Buttonwillow or Willow Springs. Those are the two closest tracks to me here in LA. But I really did not like the idea of driving a car at speed without a roll cage. That was just kind of my deal breaker for me. I know a lot of people do it. all the time. There's plenty of people that do it, and they don't have any problems. But for me, I wanted to know that I could push the car as hard as possible, and if something bad happened, I have every possible safety feature that I could afford.
Mhm.
So, and I just felt like if I was going to take my street car with no roll cage, no harness, that kind of thing, I would never want to push it 100%. So, that's kind of why I skipped right over the track day thing.
Mhm.
And I went directly to, actually my first on track experience was a driving school. I think it was called Fast Lane Driving School. They did it up in at Willow Spring. So they start you off on Streets of Willow, which is the small, tighter track,
Mhm.
and then you end up on Big Willow, which is the very very fast track, which is amazing. And Turn 9 is scary, but it's a great track. So I that was my first thing. I did that one day. I And then they had a day two, which was on a Monday. So I called in sick from work, and I'm like, you know what? I'm doing day two. So I just skipped work that day, and then I was like, I'm just going to pay to do day two of this class, and it was totally worth it.
Yeah,
I
totally.
mean, it was a little pricey, but I really wanted to. I used to watch all those SCCA races on the Speed Vision channel, or
Right.
Speed, whatever it was called
Mhm.
back in the day. And that was just like the revelation of, whoa, like kind of normal people are racing cars. I didn't even really put it together that was a thing.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, did that class, which was really really useful. But um, I I didn't really do much else other than that, other than to just go ahead and drop a bunch of change on a Spec Miata race car. So I went right from taking one driving class to buying a race car fully built. And the first time I took this car on a track, like you said with autocrossing, the first time you did it, I was very, very humbled. I was at Button Willow Raceway. I even had a coach with me for the first day, and I can't tell you how many times I went off the track. I just had no idea what I was doing. I really shouldn't have been out there. I mean, it was a track day, so there was tons of fast cars, lots of slower cars, but lots of cars all over the place, and I was out of my element. I could not. It was really bad, and I thought this is a terrible decision. But it took some time, and a few days of doing just test days with this Spec Miata race car, and I finally got to the point where, okay, I think I can actually do a wheel to wheel race. And I did the SCCA school, which is a requirement if you wanted to race, or I think NASA has a similar school,
Mhm.
which is the other organization that does wheel to wheel racing, that I've been involved with. And but essentially, you get some laps under you, and you can finally feel like, okay, I'm actually not terrible. I guess I did Spec Miata for a while, and it was a ton of fun. But I sort of realized after a while that it was sort of a lonely experience, because there's no team. It
Mhm.
was just me in my car. On any given weekend, there would be a bunch of other racers, but most other people were busy working on their vehicles or setting up their vehicles and that kind of thing. And I feel like it didn't really. I did it for about 5 years. Although the racing was very close and very tight, I had a ton of fun. I think my best finishes were third place here and there,
Nice.
which was not terrible. But I was generally sort of a mid pack driver. So I guess I sort of realized that I really wanted racing to have more of a team element.
Got
So
it, yeah.
Spec Miata was a ton of fun. I really enjoyed doing it. It was not cheap.
I looked into it when I was autocrossing because there was the Bible to any racer was grassroots motorsports. This is, early to mid 2000s, and those magazines were just chocked full of information, and it was right. Oh, 03, I think, was when Spec Miata broke, and everybody's like, the new affordable racing series. And this is before I even started autocrossing. I was like, oh my gosh, I could theoretically do this, but you know I was pretty young at the time, and looking through it, and looking at the cost, I was like, okay, yeah, wait,
Sure,
there's no way the whatever job I was working at the time is gonna be able to afford
sure,
me to go to a race weekend and do all this sort of stuff. But it was it was a really cool thing to see something like that exist, something that was meant for the beginner or for the budget conscious, which in racing terms means still a crap ton of money,
Yeah.
type of a thing. But it at least enabled people like me to have that thought like, hey, if I work hard enough, maybe I can get myself to this point, you know? So that was
Yeah.
I think a big draw for a lot of people into the Spec Miata series. And I mean, the Miata itself is, you know, it's a great car. It's a very capable track car, autocross car, endurance car, demolition derby car. Yeah, I mean,
Sure.
you do everything with them.
Off-road
Off
car,
road
yes.
car. I've seen that too. So
Yep.
I mean, they're very very capable vehicles, but that's really their home is on the track. I think so.
Yeah. Well, and that's a good point to talk about, really the word Spec Miata started, it was like you said, it was supposed to be the affordable racing
Mhm.
series, and that's why that's the same reason why I became interested in it. And we could talk a little bit about the money. I don't remember exactly because I bought my car in 2007 and I raced till about 2012.
Mhm.
So all the numbers aren't exactly fresh in my head. But and I had a pretty good job at the time, but I didn't have a ton of money. So I know this was probably not advisable, but I had one of those 0% credit cards. And you know what? I'm like, I'm going to put a Spec Miata on a 0% credit card and see if I can pay it off in a year.
Nice.
And I didn't quite pay it off in a year. And I would not recommend anybody to buy a race car on a credit card, but I did that. Um, and I think I had it paid off in a couple of years, which was fine. But so the car I bought it from a racer that was moving up to a 1999 model car. This was a 1.6. It was a 1991,
Okay.
and yeah, I paid $13,000 for that car, and that was a cheap Spec Miata. That was not an expensive Miata,
Yeah.
Spec
Yeah.
Miata.
For a built race car, I mean, you really can't
Yes.
go wrong.
And for me, it was a little tough because I had to look around to find, I'm 6'3", so it's not easy to fit in a Miata when you're taller.
Mhm.
So I had to find one that had the roll cage that was absolutely pushed all the way to the hard top and had the transmission tunnel notched out, seat bolted all the way to the floor. A few other things to kind of allow me to fit in this vehicle.
Mhm.
So it wasn't quite easy to just pick any Spec Miata that was built. And I didn't want to build one myself. Generally, the general rule is for Spec Miata is that if you want to, if you're on a budget, buy a car that's already built. Don't try to build one yourself.
Yes.
Yes.
I could imagine the cost would be probably add another 10 to the $13,000 purchase price, and you'd probably be
Sure,
looking at
it
about
could
what it would
be.
be after the car plus all the modifications,
Sure.
roll cage. Yeah, you go
Yeah,
down the
and
list.
it I think mine came with an AIM data system, so that was like I don't know, at least $1,000 right there.
Mhm.
A few other things that it had that kind of made it feel like, okay, $13,000 is a lot, but I'm getting a lot for my money. And it was I knew who drove the car before I had it, and it won many races, so I knew it was capable.
Okay.
So that was one of the other things. I didn't want to buy a piece of garbage. I wanted something that I knew wasn't that I knew that somebody had taken really good care of it and it was capable of, with the right setup of doing well.
How many races roughly did you run, and what if you can remember off the top of your head, doesn't have to be exact, a ballpark number, what would an average weekend cost to run Spec Miata?
Any given weekend, like an SCCA weekend, I could run. There would be two. Um, there would be a couple sprint races, Spec Miata sprint races, and I could also enter my car in the ITA class in SCCA, and there was also PTE class, I think it was called in NASA. So on any given weekend, if I wanted to they used to call it double dip. If I wanted to do that, I could do 4 races a
Oh,
weekend,
wow.
which they were, 30 to 45 minutes long, depending on what other classes were running. I can't really speak to the price because it was so long ago.
Sure.
I'll have more to talk about when we get to lemons in a second. But yeah, with tires and brakes and all that, it was over $1,000 a weekend.
Mhm.
A lot of the other drivers that were top 3, top 5 drivers, they were running new tires every day or every weekend at least. I would try to save my tires for a few races.
Hmm.
I'd really try to do my best to try to economize and really do it on a budget.
Hmm.
I think that if you wanted to compete at the top of Spec Miata, there's a lot of things that you needed to do that I just didn't have the budget to do.
Hmm.
And the other thing I found is, over the course of doing it for a few years, that each year there would be, okay, well, this year, we're going to allow everybody to have these new top hats. So everybody went out and bought these new top hats. And then the next year was, okay, well, we're going to allow everybody to do this adjustable fuel pressure regulator. And then, so you kind of have to go and buy these parts.
Hmm.
So that was the other thing I didn't really like was it's kind of felt like all of these rule changes were getting added to, I don't know, to try to make the cars more equal, but it just seemed like it was just a way for parts manufacturers to kind of rake in some cash. So I did not like that part about it at all, because I just wanted to get out there and race. The one thing that happened to me is that I was racing Spec Miata for a while, and then another Spec Miata racer said, "Hey, we're doing this thing called 24 Hours of Lemons, and we have this crappy automatic BMW E30 that we're going to race, and you want to join?" And I'm like, "Yeah, that sounds great." And this was 2008 maybe, so it was one of the first Lemons races at Buttonwillow. Might have been the first Lemons race at Buttonwillow. I'm not
That
sure, but
sounds about right. Timeline wise,
yeah,
I think so. Yeah.
sure. And running that race in our crappy E30, I was like, oh, wow, this is serious racing, but it's way more fun than Spec Miata.
Right.
Like, I think that's what a lot of people think. Like, oh, Lemons isn't serious racing, but if you actually go to a Lemons race, it's definitely a lot of very, very good drivers and a lot of, great teams that work really well together. And maybe looked down upon by Spec Miata racers or other racers that are running quote real series, but I thought it was way more fun. And I've never passed as many cars in a race than I passed, or at least up until that point in that Lemons race. So that was the first time I was like, wow, Spec Miata is all like, okay, you're nose to tail, and every pass is such a hard fought battle because the cars are so
Hmm.
equal. It was actually really fun to be on a track with 100 other cars and getting past and passing people and just experiencing like the sort of the melee you have to experience during a Lemons race.
So you ran the Lemons race while you were still running Spec Miata. So
Sure.
so when you were doing in the subsequent years after that, did you do any more Lemons racing before the the main switch that happened in 2012, or was it that was the only one you had done and then you had gone back to Spec Miata?
Yeah, that was the only one I'd done. I went back to Spec Miata and I sort of realized, okay, um, I gotta sell my Spec Miata at some point because I want to do Lemons more. Yeah, so it took a little while for that to happen, to find a team and all that. So that's another thing we can talk about. But yeah, so the jump from Spec Miata, like SCCA NASA sort of real racing to Lemons $500 and endurance racing for crappy cars wasn't an overnight thing for me, but once I started doing Lemons racing more regularly, it was a pretty big revelation to me that wow, racing can be competitive and you can have a great time at the end, when everybody's off the track.
Yeah, I see what you're talking about, because even just with autocrossing with the BMW CCA, there were some people out there that were running absolutely insanely set up cars, and it was like, okay, this is kind of just for fun, and your car is set up to do all this, but in the end of the day, we're just autocrossing out here. So the mentality, when it goes away from, I mean, maybe that's fun to some people, but when it goes away from let's have fun to, some scout from the BMW factory racing team is standing in the bushes with binoculars looking for their next
Yes,
superstar. That's not, that's not the mentality to have, I think, when it comes to this sort of stuff, unless you really have the money and the talent, and then you get yourself moved up past Spec Miata into something like World
sure.
Challenge, but that's something else. But this is just so for fun, because that's what racing should be. It should be fun. It should be fulfilling. And I'm intrigued with this Lemons thing because I've always wanted to get on track. Correct me if I am wrong. $500 car, but
Yes.
there's
Okay.
more.
Yes. Yeah. So 24 Hours of Lemons. I think they've been doing races since about 2008, something like that. The whole idea is $500 cars for endurance races. So the other thing about 24 Hours of Lemons is everybody tries to come up with a theme, or at least you should come up with a
Hmm.
theme. The theme for our car is Liam Neeson, named after the actor that is now. He's had some issues. Maybe he's turned out to be a racist. So I feel like we might have to change the name of our car, but that's a subject for another time.
Hmm.
Uh, but yeah, come up with a theme. So if you make your car look like a moving bed or something like that, or you have an upside down Camaro,
Yes.
that kind of thing, or you make
Seen
your
that car.
or you make your car look like a trash truck. There's a gray area there where if you go out and you really kind of embrace the spirit of this type of racing and the spirit of just kind of having fun, then they're going to let you get away with a little bit more. So the whole idea is $500, with a little bit of wiggle room. I actually dug up the spreadsheet for the car that we purchased. We purchased back in 2015, we bought a 1997 Nissan 200SX SER, which has the SR20 motor in it, which is a little bit better than the 1.6 that were in the base models. But that car we paid $1,100 for. So you might think, oh wait, that's not $500. What are you talking about? So we paid $1,100 for it, but what you can do is sell off some of the parts. So we sold off all the interior. We sold off a ton of stuff, um, and I think that got us down pretty close to 500, at least close enough where it wasn't a big deal. So,
Hmm.
um, so yeah, we in safety equipment does not count towards the total. So obviously you can spend as much as you want on brakes, roll cage, harness, seat, that kind of thing. So yeah, so just the cost of our car, just the car with nothing else, was $1,100. So that's kind of giving you an idea of what you might need to just kind of the first step
The
towards
first step.
Lemons is
There you
buying
go.
the car.
So then we go into safety, and that's where I think it gets a little scary because if you've never priced out a roll cage before, they're not the cheapest thing out there. And I think depending on where you go, it some places charge a lot more. It just depends though, but you can't put a price on safety, especially when you're going to be racing on track with 100 other people in their crap cans. And I think
Yeah.
just the way I'm thinking is if you're on track with that many people and maybe not super experienced drivers, some of them, there's
Well,
going to
yeah,
be there might be some bumping.
sure.
So,
Well, that's the other thing about Lemons is that there is no racing experience required. All you need is a car that meets the rules, your safety gear, and a driver's license. That's it.
oh boy.
Which I was very surprised that when I first started, and so were all my teammates that thought, oh wait, so just anybody can do this? Yes, just anybody can do this, which is good and bad.
I can imagine.
Yeah,
Okay, so safety stuff. So you have the roll cage, you've got a seat, you've got all this other stuff. What other prep
sure.
really goes into it? I mean, is this a thing where there's a lot of catastrophic failures? Like, I mean, an $1,100 car, depending on what it is, it's either maybe, like an SER Sentra like that one, I'm sure had a pretty stout motor in it. They're hard to kill versus like if you were to take I don't know. Trying to think of some horribly unreliable car. A Mazda RX-7 with a
Sure.
rotary engine with a turbo on it out there.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah.
I don't know that maybe that's just not maybe that is a reliable car out there. I don't know, but it, what sort of prep goes into that to make sure that
Sure.
your car survives?
Well, I guess it depends on the team. For some teams, they buy the car and they're like, okay, we're just going to run what we bought, and that's kind of what we did. But to back up a little bit, I will just tell you a little bit about the safety side of things. So,
Oh yes, yes.
we spent initially we bought one of these off the shelf roll cages that was designed to fit our car. I think we paid $900 for it, maybe 1,000, just for the metal. So we were gonna start to weld it in, and we spent a couple weekends starting to weld this thing in, and then realized kind of like as we got halfway through that this was just a crap cage. So I asked my brother to race. My brother's on my team. I've got my friend and his brother and, coworker and that kind of thing. So I don't want to invite my friends to do this thing that is potentially very dangerous and not have the absolute best safety gear possible. So we decided after a couple of days that, all right, we just wasted $1,000 in 2 weekends. So we brought the car to a place called Blackbird Fabworks, which does a lot of Miata roll bars and that kind of thing. And we were like, all right, cut out this cage that we tried to put in and build us something that will exceed the rules that Lemons has. So they built an amazing cage. It has all these extra features like footwell protection and more bars on the side than is required. A couple additional bars along the top. So I just felt like, I'm inviting my friends to do this. I want to make sure that we're all going to have a good time and nobody's going to get seriously hurt if we get in a big wreck. So that we wasted $1,000 up front, and then we spent another 2,000 to put this cage in. So you got to imagine the car for Lemons is the cheapest part. The car is like nothing. The car is essentially free when you look at all of the other things you have to do to it. So then for us, putting work into it, we get things like roll bar padding. It's like $70. Kill switch is like 50, $60. Things like a nice mirror. We bought a really nice racing seat because I wanted one with a halo. So that way, if we got in a side impact, we have a nice protection along the side. So that was $700. The mounting brackets was another 100. 6-point harness. I wanted a really good one. We bought a nice Schroth one. It was 350. So when you start to add all that stuff up, that's just kind of the safety things, Then we did a few things like valve cover gasket. We did the wheel bearings. Just kind of basic stuff: spark plugs, cap rotor, fuel filter, belts. We also redid the transmission mounts and the motor mounts because those were pretty bad. We got some polyurethane ones. Things like a battery. Once you add up all that stuff, I think we spent, if you include, let's see, I've got my spreadsheet right here. If you include all of the car plus the cage plus our failed cage experiment plus all the stuff we put into it, it was just over $7,000. So that is like a little bit more than half of what I paid for my Spec Miata.
Right.
So this is the cheapest racing that you can do, I believe, but it's still not that cheap. I mean, we have 5 teammates, so we split that amongst 5 people. It's a little bit over, $1,500 or whatever that equals to. So, it's, if you have enough people to split it amongst, it's not terrible, but it is.
That's pretty easily obtainable. That's not too bad right there. Well,
yep.
Awesome. It's funny you mentioned Blackbird Fabric. So one of my friends, he has a Miata, and he had it set up for Super Miata, I believe, and he had his cage done with him too. And I've seen the guy's work. He does amazing work. So plug to Blackbird Fabworks. There you go.
This is not a sponsored podcast, but
it is.
But
not.
if you want to sponsor it, we'll accept it. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I mean, that's pretty awesome. So that's basically half the cost of the Spec Miata, and you got your friends involved.
Sure.
And you're not at the race. You're not going to be at the racetrack alone. So moving into so you got the car, it's built. You've got your team. So what consists of a Lemons weekend?
Well, for our car, it had been very reliable for a while. So the Lemons weekend for us was basically tires. Making sure we have a nice set of tires that meet the rules. Throwing on some new brake pads before the weekend, and actually rotors too. We go through rotors pretty quick, and just kind of getting the basic setup stuff going right before we leave. So let's say the race weekend's a Saturday and Sunday. We usually like to get there on a Thursday night so we can do the Friday test day, which they usually have. So, that's another cost you got to factor in if you want to do a test day, which we did because we had a lot of drivers that have never been on a track before. So doing the test day, is another few $100 to do that. But I think it was worth it, considering that for some of our people, it was the first time on a track, first time in a race car was a Lemons weekend. So that was interesting.
I think the big draw to this is that's a way to get you out on the racetrack. If it's been one of your dreams to be a racing driver or to at least get out there, I mean, this is pretty obtainable and pretty seemingly easy to get yourself into. So
Sure. Yeah.
that's awesome, and that's I think what the initial, at least the spirit of maybe Spec Miata was supposed to be, but
Yes.
quickly evolved into something much more. So,
Sure. Yeah. So one of the things about a Lemons race weekend is you arrive before all the festivities happen. They usually do tech on Fridays, so you're showing up and you're just seeing all of these cars, everything from Crown Vics to E36s to like Alphas, like all sorts of just the widest range of crappy cars that are beat to hell, and they're
mhm.
all trying to pass tech, and there a lot of them are where people are wearing costumes, and there's just people are giving. And then the other thing with Lemons is if you feel like you're kind of bending the rules a little bit, a lot of times you'll show up with a bribe. So the first so the first time we did Lemons, we showed up with a pegboard full of Harbor Freight tools.
Ooh,
So just
nice.
like, here's a whole set, because I mean, we probably spent maybe $60 tops on bribes, but you had a really nice selection of Harbor Freight tools we could give to the judges. So they have this fun aspect to it of making sure everybody's having a good time with the themes and just the camaraderie around all these crazy people driving crazy cars. But they're pretty serious about the tech. They want to make sure that the cars are safe, and they're even little small things like the battery tie down's not tight enough. You got to go back, go get that fixed, and come back and have them recheck it out. So and it's really good because there's been some cars that have showed up with really really crappy cages that they've been trying to fix and weld the day of the race. So
Oh boy.
yep. But in terms of like fees and that sort of thing, let's see. I'll look at our most recent race, which we did. We did Button Willow in 2018. So entry fees, $600 for the car, and then it was almost $200 per driver. We factor in tires. We use Dunlop Durezas, which are about $132 each. We try to make them last as long as possible, but our car understeers like crazy everywhere we go, so it tends to core the tires pretty quickly.
Mhm.
Mounting and balancing, that's another almost $100. Brake rotors. Our brake rotors are very inexpensive, but the brake pads, we want some endurance pads. Those are quite expensive. It does start to add up a little bit, but I'd say the last race weekend that we did, if factor in the cost of like having meals, so food and fuel for the race car and fuel for the tow vehicle and all that. If you add everything up, we spent almost $4,000 for a race weekend at Button Willow,
Mhm.
and okay, split that amongst 5 people, and it's not terrible. $800 a
No,
person, approximately.
for an experience that is going to last a lifetime when you think back to oh yeah, we ran that Lemons race in 2018, even if it's just the one race. It's something that lasts forever with you, and I think that something like this could be feasible to somebody who maybe wants to set it up and split it with their friends and maybe go and do one race a year because that's what they can do, and I think it would be a great time.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah,
Well,
it's
cool.
again, you got to look at this in the scheme of the expenses of other types of racing. I mean,
Right.
$800 a person for a race weekend might seem like a lot, but it's not going to get much cheaper than that.
Right.
And I guess the risk that you run too is that you could spend $800 for a race weekend and maybe you don't get to drive because maybe the car breaks. And that's happened to a couple of us, but it's actually not as bad as it seems if you're part of a team. If you have a good team dynamics, and we do, we're all people that know each other pretty well. And you have just as much fun working on the car and getting the car ready and like being on the radio and helping the drivers get around the track and get around people. And when the track goes cold, there's always a party at a Lemons race when the track goes cold at night. That's one of the best things about this whole experience is just talking to the other teams, and really just the party atmosphere that happens as soon as the track goes cold. So, you're paying for racing, but you're also paying for this grand experience, this grand experiment called lemons.
Well, cool. It definitely sounds like something that I would love to try one day for sure. I don't think I would dare turn my beloved little Daihatsu into a Lemons car, even though it's pretty much at that point where it would be considered a great candidate. But yeah, lots of rare, hard to find parts, and I'd be really sad if
Sure,
somebody bumped it or something. So
sure. Well, and
I have to find a Taurus or something.
yeah. Well, and I think that's the other thing that, we when we that's another thing to consider when you're looking for a car. Obviously, we could have gone with something that was weirder and more unreliable to please the lemons judges, because they like the weird stuff. They like the stuff that there's absolutely no business it should be on a racetrack. I mean, that's
Sure.
kind of the spirit of lemons, is that you're driving a 1974 Buick Electra 225 or something. That is a perfect lemons car. But we when we started this, our I guess it's another thing to think about is when you're trying to get a team together, not only trying to find people that will do this regularly, but try to find people that have the same goals in mind. So our goals were, we want to have fun. We don't want to win. I mean, we want to be competitive as much as we can given our budget and given our limited skill set, but we want to just really go out there and have fun. So that for us, that meant a car that was going to be relatively fun to drive and not just a beast or a bear to try to just get this thing to go around the track. So
Mhm.
a lot of the people on my team, they'd never been on a racetrack before. They wanted a car that felt like it wasn't just driving a malaise, luxury cruiser
Right.
around that. So that's how we ended up with the 200 SX, which it's front wheel drive. It's not a incredibly sporty car, but it's sort of the successor to the Sentra SER, which was an amazing little car. So,
Yeah.
um, and it's got the Nissan SR20, which is tons of fun. 140 horsepower. And the good thing about this vehicle is that it tends to understeer everywhere, which hurts our lap times and hurts our tires and hurts our feelings, but it generally keeps us out of trouble. So we're not constantly, trying to fight this thing from spinning out. It's always just going to push everywhere you go. So that's kind of a nice thing to think about too. If you have a lot of beginners on your team, try to find a car where that it's not going to be a huge hassle to try to get this thing around a track.
Right. Versus like, going out and finding I don't think you could, but finding a $500 like first generation MR2 or
Sure.
something like that that's kind of a tricky car to drive,
Well,
it's going to be a lot more
yeah. I mean, even
difficult.
even a 1.6 Miata, like my Spec Miata, even that, like, it took a lot more skill to drive quickly around a track than, obviously it was going quite a bit faster than our little 200 SX, but I think to a lot of newbie drivers, I think we would have been spinning out a lot. I mean,
Mhm.
when I first got my Spec Miata, I spun out a lot. So, I don't think the only time we've ever spun the our lemons cars is in the rain. So yeah, I'd say that's kind of just a thing to think about, is think about what type of drivers you got. If they're new, maybe make it easy, a little bit easier on them.
Well, cool. It definitely sounds like a good next step after maybe you try autocrossing and you want to go to the next thing. There is the track day aspect, but as we spoke about or you spoke about it, that whole I don't know if I want to drive a lot of times my daily driver out on the racetrack and then have to drive that
Sure.
same car to work on Monday after maybe you had an off track excursion or something.
Yep.
Um, so lemons is the next would at least in your opinion and in my opinion would be the next logical step you would take, and maybe that's as far as you take it, but there are other paths to take after that if you wanted to keep going. It's just a matter of money and a bit of talent too. So, but it definitely sounds like it would be an awesome experience to get up there, and especially like because the majority of them are endurance races, right? You said they're multiple day events.
Sure. Yes, exactly. I mean, I'm not sure if they've ever done sprint races, or maybe they've been talking about doing that. I don't know. but yes, they're endurance races, and that's the other part of it. You get a ton of track time
Yeah.
for the money, and that's the other thing that I think is really valuable
Mm-hmm.
is it's a really great learning experience, I think, because not only do you get a ton of track time, because a lot of times your stints are an hour and a half or however long you go from full tank to running out of gas a lot of times. Um, there's all sorts of cars traveling at different speeds, and the closing rates are different depending on areas of the track and that sort of thing. So it's a really great learning experience for, okay, how am I going to get around this slower car, or how am I going to get around this car that's kind of equally matched, or dealing with 20 really slow cars in traffic and figuring out how you're going to pick through them without causing an incident. And that's the other thing about endurance racing is, I think, which is a lot different than my Spec Miata experience. Spec Miata was like, you didn't have much time. You had 40 minutes to try to get from wherever you're qualified to the front. And it was very difficult and very aggressive. So
Mm-hmm.
I think lemons can get aggressive, but generally, most of the people know that this is an endurance race. Going 2 seconds faster a lap is going to gain you absolutely nothing.
Mm-hmm.
It really comes down to consistent laps, staying out of trouble, don't get any black flags, because if you go 2 off or 4 off, they're going to pull you in for a black flag.
And as you were talking about this, I was thinking about the amount of seat time that you get. And from a track day, I think, they're a couple $100, and you're going to get maybe a grand total of, hmm, I don't know, an hour, maybe an hour and a half, depending on
Hmm.
how big of a event it is, you know. And so when you think about it in that perspective with the money, like we'll say, that round $900 a weekend number, the amount of time you're going to get, because seat time is that's what you really need if you want to progress as a racing driver. You need to have that experience, especially, like, I can see how lemons would be great with learning how to pass correctly. Um, just different race strategies you would have as a driver. It could be extraordinarily beneficial for not a whole lot of money versus somebody who just does track days. It's going to take you longer to get to the point you would if you were just racing lemons. So I think that aspect of it alone is definitely worth that entry fee.
Sure. Yeah, and I
Totally.
guess I guess it just comes down to, what do you want to get out of your on track experience? For me, it wasn't about lap times. For me, it's about wheel to wheel racing. It's about the craft of trying to get around somebody, the craft of like trying to set up passes, and kind of understanding, where's the best place on the track to get around a certain type of car. And that's kind of the part about lemons racing, about racing in general, that I really love. And just kind of going around the track, setting my time, my best time. I understand that's going to be an amazing experience for many people, but that just didn't sound that appealing to me.
Yeah, I could see how learning the racecraft would be more fulfilling than hitting that lap time. I mean, obviously, the anybody who's racing, the thought and the thrill of like winning is definitely there, but at the same time, you got to kind of take yourself back a little bit and see what it is that you're actually racing, and you're like, not necessarily it's the car, but just like the series. And it's okay, we're
Sure.
working to have fun and to gain experience, and maybe there is somebody in the bushes standing there waiting with binoculars. Hey, that lemons
Yeah.
driver's awesome. We should put him on the whatever te- team it may be. I don't know if there's scouts at these events, but still.
I hope not.
Yeah, you were the one that was driving the car that was shaped like a hot dog, right?
Yes, yes,
The hot dog car. So,
yes.
things
We'd
like
like to
that.
offer you a ride in the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series.
Yeah.
Yes.
I don't
Oh
know. I
no.
don't know if any of those stories ever happened, but maybe. Who knows? Well, cool. I think that's definitely a cool experience. And just another quick thing to add. So, from a spectating standpoint, you can go and watch these races when they have them, right? They have.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes. Yes, definitely. And there's and I'd say that this is probably one of the most fun racing experiences that I've actually watched, because of just the spectacle of of all the ridiculous cars and all of the, the costumes and that kind of thing. So
Mhm.
it's a lot of fun as a spectator as well.
Yeah, I'm a fan of all sorts of racing, and you have pinnacle of motorsports. You've got Formula One, which is kind of almost like a procession where there is some passing, but everything's kind of to be expected. But
Sure.
you have like sports car racing where it's kind of a completely different story where
Yeah.
it's more mixed up. But this, I think, would be I guess you could say like a very pure type of racing to watch, because the people out there, they're really trying, and it's comical to watch because they've, maybe got a hot dog car or something. I don't know why I keep going back to that. I keep
Well,
thinking about the
yeah, I mean, it's pretty
Oscar Mayer
silly.
Wienermobile during this whole thing.
but it,
So,
but it is interesting because you have that crazy factor of it, but there are some very, very good drivers in Lemons. And I think that's what also makes it really fun, where, yeah, you might have a couple incidents here and there, but I feel like uh I've seen way fewer crashes in Lemons than I've seen in Spec Miata. So
oh wow.
yes.
And that's with a much larger field too. So,
Yes.
wow.
Yeah, sometimes there's hundreds of cars, and I think part of it is just the endurance race, aspect of it, where most of the people know that they're gonna win the race on the pit stops. They're gonna win the race on being consistent and staying clean. Whereas Spec Miata, where it's a sprint race, you got to win the race on being as aggressive as possible.
Sure.
So,
Yeah, I think just
yeah,
finishing any one of those events is winning and enough. You make it through the whole weekend without incident or breakdown.
sure, yeah. I
There,
think our last race at Button Willow, we finished like, I forget, like 89th or something, and we were just cheering and celebrating. We were so happy.
that's awesome. And was that the first one that you guys had finished with the car, or
We finished a few races. That was our
okay?
first race at Button Willow that we had finished, because the
Mm,
last time we raced at Button Willow, we were running into axle problems and all sorts of, like, we couldn't get the car started for a few hours. So yeah, it kind of ruined our day. But this was the last Button Willow race was a really, really excellent event.
cool, awesome.
Yeah.
Well, that's a whole lot of racing right there. That's
Yes.
tons of fun. So, I mean, I love racing. I've always loved racing since I was a tiny little kid watching those Herbie movies, and
Yeah.
just getting to, I mean, watch it is one thing, but getting to do it is something that always is, it excites me. I think about the racing a lot. Like
Sure.
I've told this to my wife before. She's like, "What are you doing?" And I was like, thinking about racing. She's like, "What are you thinking about?" And I'm like,
Doing it.
doing it, be it whatever it is. If it's like whatever my flavor of the week is, oh, I'm going to turn the Daihatsu into a rallycross car, or I'm going to turn
Sure.
the Fiesta ST into a road course car or time attack car. It changes all the time with me, but I just, it consumes my mind is the best way to put it.
Sure.
So I'm
Yeah.
thinking about it right now. Like,
Well, I think the thing is that it is obtainable. It's um even if, let's say, you don't even, let's forget the whole aspect of owning a car or preparing a car. I mean, there's plenty of teams on many series, not just Lemons, but Champ Car, which is the formerly known as Chump Car, Lucky Dog. There's plenty of teams that just they're looking for a driver. So, if you have some experience, maybe you're a good wrench or something, you can show up, and maybe they'll have you on your team. It might cost just as much as it would if you owned a car for that weekend, but maybe 800,000 bucks for a weekend, but you don't have to put in the risk of, you don't have to put in the initial funds of you know putting putting together a car and
Mhm.
trying to piece together a team. There's plenty of teams that are looking for a driver for a weekend, so that might be one good way for somebody that wants to get a little bit of racing experience to dip their toe into it.
Hmm. I might have to look into that. That might be fun. Not might, that would be fun. Who am I
Of
kidding? That would
course it
be
would be.
awesome.
Just don't crash. Just
No.
don't crash their car.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that would be bad too. Cool. Well, that
All
was a
right.
whole ton of racing. That was awesome. A lot of fun. So we're getting pretty close to time on this one. So car spotting, we don't really have a whole ton of time. If I just want to add one really fast thing that was
Sure.
interesting to see. I did see it on the way to Las Vegas, and I I've only seen these at car shows. I'm sure a lot of us have. I saw coming the other direction on the 15 freeway, so this would be going southbound, going at a pretty quick rate of speed, a black Porsche 918 Spider.
Oh, okay.
I mean, it's completely opposite of
Sure.
racing Lemon's cars, but
Well, yeah. I mean,
it's not something you expect to see. Somebody taking a multi-million dollar Porsche 918 Spider and blasting through the desert.
sure.
But hey,
Who knows? It could have been a Fiero, just a replica. You know, it's
oh,
very
it
possible.
could have been. It could have been. So either or, that was pretty cool to see.
Yeah.
So cool.
I didn't have any. I didn't have any really good car spotting. I mean, I did see one thing. I saw a Mexican market Volkswagen Gol. It was the latest generation, probably like a 2008. So really, I thought it was interesting. I saw it 3 times this week. So this guy's just driving around with this random Volkswagen Gol, not the Golf, the Gol,
The goal.
the Gol. Uh, so yeah, I hadn't seen one of those ever, other than the interweb. So I
Yeah.
thought that was kind of interesting. So
You'll
not
probably,
90, not Porsche interesting, but
well,
interesting in its own way.
right. You'll probably see a good few things down there in San Diego this weekend, or whenever it is you're going to be heading out there. Because
Sure,
there's going to,
exactly.
when I've been down there, it's like you'll see the odd Renault running around because they're
Yep,
present down there in Mexico.
sure.
So yeah, cool. Good stuff. Good stuff.
All right.
I think we can end it there. I don't think, yeah, we're already hitting time. Everybody's probably already hitting snooze on this one. We hope not. So
Sure.
cool. I think that's good.
All right. Yeah, we can we talk about where we can find you, Paul.
We can find me at Instagram at charade life. That's charade underscore life. And my MySpace got hacked, so
Ah,
you can't
man, I know
find
they
me there
deleted all those
anymore.
songs.
They
That's
did.
terrible.
They did.
Ah,
They,
nobody cares.
nobody cares.
Yep. And you can find me youtube.com/hello road and instagram.com/Mr. Ethan Tuft. So I guess that's the end of our podcast, maybe.
Yep.
At least this one. We'll do another one next week, but
We'll
not
be
the end of this series, but
we'll be back.
yeah, we'll be back.
We'll be
All right.
back. Bye, everybody. Thank
All
you.
right. Bye.